Welcome to the Deconstructing Data podcast and live stream. I'm Jessie Lezak, CMO at BDEX, along with David Finkelstein, founder and CEO of BDEX. What's new, David?
Hey, Jesse, good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Going to be another good podcast today. Hopefully the storm that's going on outside won't interrupt my connection because we had a massive thunderstorm that's been going through. So we'll see how this goes.
Awesome. Yeah, hopefully it doesn't, because this is going to be another really great discussion. Today on Deconstructing Data, we're thrilled to welcome Ana Mourão. She's the Global Customer CRM Senior Manager and CDP Advisor of Stanley Black Decker Incorporated. You probably all remember the vacuum cleaners. Well, welcome to the show, Ana.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jesse and David, for having me back.
Absolutely, Anna. We're so glad to have you back on the show for a second time. So this is exciting to get a nice follow-up. But for the people that didn't hear the first episode, why don't you give them a little bit of a background about you and what led you to join Stanley Black Decker?
Sure. So I have been working initially with digital marketing, and because I like to see the measurements and kind of gather data inside so that I can improve campaigns, etc., I ended up being working and being more connected with the customer data side of it. And when I joined Stanley Black Decker about 7 years ago, I was actually hired to put in place a martech stack that would help us really create and maintain our end user database. So the information about the people that actually buy our tools and use our tools. And with that, we can generate demand on behalf of our distributors and retailers, and we can be closer to the end user when we need to do research or focus groups, etc.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate that. And we're so glad that you're back to join us again. And I know when we talked last time, we talked a lot about some of the challenges that Stanley Black Decker had in the fact that they didn't have a direct relationship with the customer, right? So you had to build an infrastructure to enable a conversation with the customer because most people are buying the products, through channels. But now, moving on from there, we want to dig a little deeper. And one of the things that was interesting that you said you wanted to talk about was sort of demystifying the data party landscape from talking about first and second and even third party data. So I'd love for you to kick us off on that topic.
Thank you, David. Yes. So throughout my work, and not only at Stanley Black Decker, but at other Fortune 500 companies as well, mostly going through digital transformation, I ended up working a lot with building that type of first party customer data, right? And I worked for other B2B companies that also did not have the sale information, the right there conversion, the hard conversion it bought, or any type of established attribution, right? So developing that first party data becomes even more strategic, even more important, because that can really guide a lot of your efforts and can give you a very strong foundation, right? And that can also give you a lot of levers, as we will see. But what also caught my attention in a lot of conversations I have had with other marketers in other industries as well, is that there's not a very good understanding, overall understanding of what first party, second party, and third party customer data is, right? Outside of our martech or more technical environment. When you talk to the average marketer, so to speak, the non-tech oriented or non-martech oriented marketer, they may not be sure exactly what is what or what the benefits are. So I would start there, right? Defining what first party data is. And first party data is the one that you collect with consent, right? So it's the data you capture, like, would you like to receive a newsletter? So newsletter signups, any type of sign up, any type of account creation, right? Where there is the consent, preferably the explicit consent, that unmarked checkbox, that the end user or the customer himself or herself can go and check and confirm that yes, they do give consent to receiving market information from your brand, your company. The other side of the first party data is via cookies, right? So via behavior. So that is what we capture when we see those banners, right? Oh, do you consent to, or do you agree, accept our cookies collecting your behavior, or just the necessary cookies that do not include the marketing cookies? So that is another type of consent for the other type of first party data you can collect, right? Which is the behavior, someone that navigated your page or took an action that you can capture via that cookie, via that person being on your digital property, so to speak, right? So all that consented data is really what we call first party data. And it can include attributes, properties like name, email address, and it can include behaviors like clicked on an email, visited a page, downloaded an app, etc. Right? Even if it's not the conversion behavior itself, behaviors and events can be captured. So that's the first party data. Second party data is when you have access, for instance, I'm a retailer, right? And I sell my product at Walmart. So Walmart could have my second party data, which would be data that does not belong to me, but can have an overlap with my own first party data, right? And in these cases, the technology of clean rooms can be super handy, and we'll also discuss that in a bit. But it can be super handy because it can give you a very privacy first, compliant place for you to scrub your aggregated first party data against your retailer or a partner's aggregated first party data, and you can see overlaps, and that overlap can help you enrich your data. Or in this case, like using Walmart as an example, if I am the brand and I sell at Walmart and I do this clean room analysis, I can then activate some of my first party data via Walmart trade or via Walmart online advertising, right? In a very safe way without really having Walmart seeing my first party data, right? Being very mindful of that, but allowing me to test or to create control groups where I see incrementality of using that type of data scrubbing or using some of that activation in Walmart within Walmart digital properties, for example. And then we have the third party data, which is the one that is collected throughout the internet. And of course, if you go to the terms and conditions, you see that a lot of websites are collecting a lot of data, but it's not necessarily explicit, right? So my behavior online, what I clicked and didn't click. There are a lot of companies that have little cookies on those sites, and they gather all this information, and then they in turn sell that, right? To companies. So companies can then buy like women my age from living in South Florida who speak Portuguese, what have you, or Latin American. And then they can have that segment and they can then sell that segment, right? I didn't necessarily consented exactly on how that data was collected and stitched, but throughout my navigation, that data was collected and it was informed via terms and conditions, preferably, right? That this was being done. Some companies do not even get that type of terms and conditions verbiage, and they just collect the data, collect the behavior, and sell it. And legally here in the United States, that is okay, that is legal. So those are the very different types of customer data you have. So you have one where it's super consented, when you establish a relationship of trust, where you establish which data you're collecting, how you're going to use that data, and then you can safely scrub that data against partners and being very loyal to your own data privacy policy. And then you have data that is collected all over, and so then you can then use it and also use to enrich your first party data, or you can then use the third party data on your own just to test it, to use it, but it's not yours. And you don't know exactly how that stitching was made. You don't know how that ID resolution was made. So if people ask you, or if you have to, let's say, use that data to train a model, a language model, you won't be able to do as much because it's a data that was collected without you knowing, you don't understand exactly what is in it. With the first party data, yes, you know exactly what is in it. So it gives you more levers. So that's part of what I think it's important for marketers to understand. And it's part of what makes the first party data so strategic, right? It's a much stronger foundation, one based in trust, one based in consent, one based in the company establishing that communication and trust with the customers, versus me just buying stuff and then sending you an email and like crossing my fingers that it's going to work because I bought a segment somewhere from some vendor, right? So those are the biggest difference. And I'm not here condemning, please, by all means, it's not a shade to whomever uses third-party data. I just want marketers to use it knowing of those differences and understanding what they mean to your work on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, it's very important. We're always promoting people to leverage their first party data because that's their most valuable data. And one of the biggest challenges that people have is managing that data, controlling that data. That's the data that they know that is best. But one of the biggest challenges is people don't always know what to do with it. I mean, a lot of this first party data is data about existing customers already. So depending on the size of the company, they may not necessarily know how to leverage that data. There's so many different ways you can leverage that data. Understanding what your existing customers are doing can be really insightful into how to leverage and build access to new customers, right? And the more you know about your existing customers, the stronger knowledge you have about who's using your products, your services, your website, whatever it is, the better you can leverage that to gain new customers. And that's what we're always trying to teach people how to do.
Nice.
Like you said, the challenges with third-party data is you don't know where it came from. You don't know the consent. You don't know the quality of it. And our experience has been with a lot of our customers as they come to us with that problem, where they've gotten data from some third party that isn't working for them. It's breaking their process. And they're saying, okay, how can you help us fix that? So I think it is extremely important, to your point, to make sure that people understand how to leverage their first party data.
Absolutely. And I'm happy to know that, you guys are also helping companies. And also, I think the secret sauce here is the data governance, right?
Mm-hmm.
So whenever you have your first party data strategy, you need to understand what data you have, what you don't have, how this data should be organized, thinking about the activation, right? So how is it that I'm going to use this data? So which data points do I need to really personalize someone's communication or to run a good test? So that's a lot of work, of course, but that's what build the levers that you're going to have that you can then change, right? Having that knowledge. And I think that that's also something that marketers should really lean in, because we have the knowledge of how the data is collected, right? We know in which promotions, how is it that we're collecting this data? What type of behaviors would really help us improve the communication, right? Like we know that we should test the most engaged audience and see if we can increase the frequency or the amount of communication we send in order to, I don't know, get to a certain conversion or get to the point where we want for them to have the behavior we're expecting, right? So all those things can happen once you have this strategy and this governance in place, right? And then if you build if you are involved in building that data governance, it gives the marketer way more power, because then right? I just mentioned that for third party data, you don't know how things were done, you don't know how the identity resolution was done, and here you totally can, right? You can be part of that conversation, you can help that happen. So that's the beauty, and that's why I think first-party data is so strategic, because it forces the company to think of those things, right? It forces the marketer to think of how they're going to use that data and how is it really should be organized to help on that activation. I think that's really, and again, it requires work, governance work, but it really pays off. That's when you really see the gift that keeps on giving. The first party data really kind of increasing and becoming that little growth loop of first party data, where you first collect and then you enrich, and then based on that enrichment you can improve the experience, and that generates more engagement, and then you're collecting and then you're enriching more, and it becomes a virtuous cycle of first party data. And that's how you get to there, at least in my experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you mentioned you dug a little bit into data strategy, and that's our next topic. So we wanted to talk about the importance of owning your data strategy. And one of the things that we've talked about before, but I think is really important, is a lot of times when people go into sort of this data strategy conversation, their strategy is not goal oriented. They go into it just saying, oh, well, we need to collect all of this data. And then once we collect all this data, we'll figure out what to do about it. But one of the things that we've learned is it's really important to define what is your goal first, because you can get overwhelmed with a lot of data.
Absolutely.
And then to try to figure out what to do with it all afterwards can get very messy. So I'd love for you to kind of talk a little bit further about owning your data strategy and why that's so important.
Sure. So I would say that the owning of the data strategy is exactly what makes the first party foundation, the first party data, the foundation of that strategy. And again, it makes it grow on a virtual cycle and allow you to then use that data to like train models, to be predictive, etc., to do AI decisioning, etc. Right? And I think it really starts with defining what data what data you have, defining that governance, right? And also making sure that you're coming from your use cases. To your point, right? So that it's not just like, oh, I'm collecting data because, oh, of course, why not collecting all data? Why not collect the most data points, right? But then what are you going to use it? How you're going to use it? How is that going to work for you? How is that going to work for your activation? So you start with the use cases, because then you know. So let's say I have a use case where I want to increase the amount of visits to my product page, because I know that on the product page, after seeing the product page that number of times, people click on the where to buy and go to my distributor, let's say, right? So how do I do that? What is it needed from it? Then I work backwards. So it's not like, oh, let's collect everything and see what sticks. No, we're going to start with this use case. And also, I recommend a proof of concept, right? So start with something small. Maybe get your smallest brand or your smallest business unit, right? Something that is small but representative. Cannot be too easy so that it doesn't really like kick the tires of the whole strategy for you. Start with something that is small but representative and see how that goes. Get the use cases, put those use cases together. And what I also found out is that by putting those use cases together, marketers can usually also find opportunities for process improvement, right? So when we are doing that, we realized that we could go to market faster. And that's has a lot of opportunities for us, because then you can test faster and you can have the insights of that test faster as well. Or it can decrease our dependency on vendors, right? Because now you organize your data, you organize your processes, or there may be some steps or some vendors or some platforms that you don't need anymore, don't make sense anymore. So those opportunities are also involved there. And usually they are not even thought of or mapped, right? Because we usually start from the place, oh, we need the platform, we need the technology, and not we have this use case or we have this business objective that we need to meet. And That's not the right way, right? The right way is to start from the business objective, from the use case, doing a small proof of concept and then expanding instead of like, let's start with, okay, we need this platform, we need this technology, and then working backwards. So that's my experience.
Yeah, for sure. People can get very overwhelmed very quickly. But I didn't want to like overlook how like smooth you were with that cat when the cat walked through in front of your camera.
Apologies for that. I tried to keep her locked, but she manages to escape.
Well, also, other human things. We had a comment come in from Andrew, and he raises his hand. He says, as a first-time founder, what does it mean to own your data strategy? You want to take that one, Ana?
Ooh, very good question, Andrew. Thank you so much. Yes, owning your strategy means that you know where your information or your data is coming from, right? And you have a strong first-party data strategy where you have consent to build your database and you have consent to collect more data. Type of data you're collecting, understand how you're collecting and how you're going to enrich and use it and how this is all connected. So that would be the foundation of the data strategy here. Instead of just, I think that a lot of companies, especially startups, may say, you know what, I just got this vendor and this platform and they'll bring all the data for me and it's done. And I would recommend against that. So you can use the vendor. Still, you can use the platform, but think of your strategy. Think of the data you need to have to power your business.
That's great advice.
Yeah, what would you add to that, David?
Yeah, I mean, I think Anna, she hit it on the nail, but the reality is like, you know, I'm very goal oriented. So for me, it all comes down to making sure you understand why you're collecting the data. It's not just about collecting data. There's got to be a purpose behind it. You have to define your goal. Like my goal is to, collect my user data so that I can understand how users are using my products, and so that I can, advance my products and have good customer service or whatever it is, like whatever that specific goal is. It's important to define that first. Otherwise, you get into a situation where either you're collecting more data than you need and it's overwhelming to people that are trying to use it, or you're not collecting the right data at all. And so a lot of people just go into, let's just collect everything, instead of looking at, okay, what is our goal? What is the reason why we're collecting the data? What data points do we need to get there? And that's it.
Exactly.
It can really be as simple
Exactly.
as that.
Totally. Could not agree more. Exactly.
100%. Well, in terms of how owning your data strategy sets you apart, would either of you have anything else to add before we move on?
I would say that when you own your data strategy, you also own how this data can be used, how it can train a large language model, right? And so it gives you so much more to work with versus, I just plug something in that brings data, intent, signals from wherever, and I act upon it. Again, nothing against it, right? But please be mindful. Be mindful that you understand that when you rent data, the data is not yours. Meaning that if you need to feed it to a model, you don't know what's in it. So the model may not perform as you expect it to, and you won't be able to do much. With your data, you know exactly what you're feeding into the model, right? And you can understand whatever issues or deficiencies, and you can address that because you know what's in it. You know what's in the recipe, right?
Mhm.
Versus the third party data. So those are the distinctions that I think marketers should be very mindful of, and then be pay a lot of attention to, so that they understand which levers they have and which they don't, right? And with third party data, you have less levers. Sorry, so you need to understand that as well.
Yep.
Such a great point. Okay, well, let's move into clean rooms, clear wins, unlocking next level marketing
Ooh.
power. Ana, can you kick us off?
Yes. So clean rooms is actually a technology, and Nowadays, you have many vendors, Amazon being one of them. So a lot of you guys may already be using clean rooms without realizing, right? But it's just the opportunity to scrub your first party data against other companies' first party data in a very safe way, right? Because the clean room is going to be the entity in the middle, right? So the clean room will make sure that they receive your first party data and they super anonymize it. So there's no way that nobody's going to recognize which data it is. And they do the same with the data that they get from your partner, let's say Amazon, right? And then this very anonymized data, aggregated data is scrubbed against each other. So let's say, I would say that I can see that 20% of my engaged audience is also on Amazon, or 20% of my audience who identify themselves as construction workers are there in Amazon, and they usually see this type of category, product category the most, right? And again, with Amazon, I can even leverage that information in order to create activations inside Amazon itself, right? The same could be said with a Walmart. Or I could even scrub against another partner so that I can just have more demographic information, or more socioeconomic information about my first party data. And then I can say, oh, you know what? That percentage of my first party data also goes to this type of website, or consume this type of service or product. Interesting. Let me bring that back, that idea. And again, I won't know at the personal level. So I won't know that Ana Mourão is the one. Da, da, da. No, but I will know that that chunk of my database has that overlap with that other database. And that already guides me, right? And can guide me to test something with that type of audience and a specific publisher, a specific market, and then I can do a control group and see if that really drives incrementality to my efforts, to my activities. So I think that clean rooms are now very underutilized, right? Because I think there is still a lot of companies still kind of using the third party data, and they're just like, no, I just read my data. But no, there is a lot of benefit for you to really own your first party data and scrub it against a partner or a company that makes sense to your business, and see that overlap and let that guide some of your efforts as well. If that makes, does that make sense?
Yeah. And one of the really cool things about where we are today, implementing AI with all of this, is that you can just talk to your data, you know?
Oh, absolutely.
It's amazing. Like, you don't have to do, it used to be you'd have to like have all these analysis tools and, charts and graphs and all this stuff. And those are great. But, sometimes it was like kind of difficult to try to figure out what do you want to look at? But now you can literally just say, hey, I'm curious, how many of my, customers do this and do that? And it can just tell you. And it's just wild how, AI is transforming everything. And I think that it's making data clean rooms even easier to use now.
Totally.
It's amazing. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And actually, that brings us to interesting musings, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because once you have AI helping that much, it should free time from marketers, right? And other business stakeholders to do more, to be even more strategic, right? To think of other ways of activating data, or to think of other ways of enriching the data in a very strategic way. So the idea here is really to remove some of that more repetitive grunt, quote unquote, work, like figuring
Yeah.
out which segments am I going to test. Well, if you have AI decisioning tools, right, as part of your stack, for instance, the AI decisioning tool can do that for you. You give the outcome, for instance, and you give some creative assets, and you say, okay, go. And then they can serve those creative assets in a way where they see the most likely path to reach that outcome, right? So all the time that I would spend like coming up with a segmentation to then test the hypothesis, that work is done. And not by the human, not by the marketer, by AI. by the decisioning tool. So all of a sudden you have that extra time as well. And then you can be like, whoa, that's so fun. And I can go and think of other outcomes that I want and test other business outcomes that are important for us. And then grab other type of assets. And you can be working on more of the fun stuff, more of the insights and how to do it better and how to increase engagement with your customers or conversion with your customers versus having to do so much of the operational work to get there.
Yeah. Yeah. I used to take a lot of, a lot of time, a lot of people, a lot of resources to do a lot of the things that we can do with AI right now. That is just making it so much easier for us to spend our time on things that are, a little less redundant and menial, I'll say.
Exactly. That's the promise, at least, right? So fingers
Yeah.
crossed.
Definitely. Yeah. So, what would be your take on clean rooms, David? I know that was a big thing we were doing here at BDEX for a little while. Anything you want to add on that topic?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that, for me, I just think that, the clean room technology, like where we're using it for is, just for helping identify, do data or consumers that we can do data enrichment for, things like that, building
Nice.
audiences against things like that. But I think that where I really see sort of the future in data clean rooms is AI. I just think that the ability for us to start using AI to talk to our data just opens up so many doors for us for making things so much easier and letting people get more out of it and more efficiently.
Mm,
Nice.
That's a big thing.
Very nice.
definitely. 100%. Um, I see a comment. Looks like this is from earlier where AP said, got it. Thank you, Anna plus David. Having the why behind what data you're collecting matters. And then Word Solver TV says, hi. So whoever they are, hi. And thanks to everyone who's tuning in. And if you're tuning in, like, let us know where you're tuning in from. If you have any questions or comments, share them in the chat. And unless we hear from anyone else in the chat, let's go ahead and move on to our last topic that, as you know, Anna, we ask everyone on the show. You've been on before, so we've asked you before, but what are some of your favorite tools in your tech stack these days?
Ooh, so first of all, I'm very proud to say that we have kind of the foundation of the stack is the same, still the same, right? So I think that we did good in finding a stack that gave us some flexibility, some agility, and also allowed us to scale and grow. So I'm pleased. And now I'm very curious about using AI decisioning, right? How would that work, and how would that help us? And in our case, we have some of that already embedded in our marketing automation platform and in our CDP as well, our data repository platform. So excited with that.
Cool. Awesome.
Very cool. Definitely. Yeah. I don't know. We haven't heard of anything like that. Have we, David? I don't
Nope.
think so.
We
Yeah.
always, we always get lots of
Ooh,
new good stuff. So thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for sharing, Anna.
of course.
Awesome. So along those notes, let's go ahead and I guess wrap up. We did get, one last question here.
Yeah.
Let me see from AP. He says, what data do you need to power your business?
Ooh.
I mean, that's pretty general.
Yeah,
But how
It
would you
is
take that?
depends on the business, but
for sure.
again, I would be very biased towards first party data from your consumers or clients, right? So
Mhm.
understand who they are and what they're looking for and start collecting that data and creating that data growth loop where you're always like collecting, enriching, and using that enriched data to improve the experience. I would say that would be the go-to.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we're always talking primarily about marketing data here on
Yes.
Deconstructing Data. So that customer data is the most important. Understanding your customers, understanding your customer's journey. Where did they come from? What are they doing? What are they buying? and how did they reach you so that you can reach more customers just like them? Those are sort of like the
Exactly.
most important pieces of the puzzle.
Totally.
I love that. Well, since we have one more minute or a few more minutes left, Anna, what secrets, tips, and tricks can you share that will prepare us for the future of data in marketing?
Mm.
Ooh, my goodness. That's a tough one, right? So, tips: mind your first party data, right? Understand how AI can help you there, like manage the data, enrich the data. So, that's also important, but be very, very mindful of data privacy as well. Okay, so be mindful of getting consented data, be mindful of understanding why you're collecting data and getting data that you can use to improve your customer or client's experience, right? Not collecting data just for collecting data. So I think the fundamentals would stay, right? But on top of it, we would have this layer, AI layer, that would make everything more accessible, easier to find, as David mentioned. That's really a big, big difference, and can help us like get more of our tools, of our existing tools, and improve our marketing processes behind our marketing activations as well.
Yep, I love that. Well, thank you so much for sharing. And would
Sure.
love to hear any of your reactions to that, David. What would you share?
Yeah, actually, I love the question. And the one thing that comes to mind is that we don't even realize it right now, but I think that we're literally only seeing the tip of the iceberg on how AI is going to affect marketing.
Totally.
And
Totally.
that's crazy to think of when you look around and you see how many different ways people are using AI in marketing today. How many different tools there are out there and how many different ways people are using it. So I think the important thing and the lesson to learn here is that it's really important for people to truly understand how AI works and how to use it. And I think, like,
Totally.
to Anna's point, very early in the conversation, she I don't remember, was it, I don't even remember if it was on the live show or if it was in the green room beforehand, but you mentioned taking a class on AI. And I think that's really important, because one of the things that I'm finding is the more I talk to people is like, they're like, oh, I asked ChatGPT to do this and it gave me this answer. And it didn't really work the way they said they thought it was going to work. And 9 times out of 10, that's because you didn't ask the question correctly. People don't
Totally.
understand how important prompting is with AI. Like, you have to
Totally.
train the AI in not just asking it a question, but why you're asking the question. What's the context behind the question? What's your goal in the answer that you're looking for? And the reality is, a prompt asking, AI to give you some information, a prompt could be really long. Like, I've seen prompts that are pages and pages long
Totally.
because the people, or the person that's doing it is really, explaining in a lot of detail, the context behind the question and the voice that they're looking for when they're asking for content to be written or things like that. Who you're trying to reach, what type of information you want it to pull to get to the your end result. And if you don't prompt it right, it's just going to grab the first information that it finds. Think about this.
Exactly.
Like, if you ask it, I'll stay really simple. Like, if you ask it for a recipe, give me a recipe for brownies. You're going to get a recipe for brownies, but you know what? You don't know where it got that recipe from. It could have been from somebody's blog, you know? But if you really want to make the best brownies, tell tell ChatGPT before you ask for the recipe, say, you are, a Michelin chef,
Exactly.
and you're trying to make brownies for, a contest where you want to be, you're going against the top chefs in the world, you know? Like, if you want to make you want to get the best brownie recipe out of ChatGPT, like, you have to tell it all this context about what you're trying to go. Like, I want it to be all natural. we don't want any preservatives in it, but we want it to be the best, and so on and so on and so on. You'll get a really good recipe. But, if you just ask it, give me a recipe, you're going to get, who knows where it's going to come from. But the reality is, like, the more information you have to train it, like, you want the best information. You want it to be professional. If you want to ask about marketing information, tell it you're an expert marketer. Now give me the information I want, because it'll go to the best resources. And I found this actually, I'll give a quick example. Like, my wife was asking for some nutritional information, and she just asked the question and she got the answer. And I said, you know what? Tell ChatGPT you're, an expert nutritionalist first. Then ask the same question. She got a completely different answer, because just that simple addition to your prompt tells ChatGPT where to get the information from. Like, get it from the best sources, the sources that are from an expert, as opposed to just some random location online, because the AI is going to try to get you the quickest answer as it can.
Yes, it's a very good point. Context is everything prompt. Totally agree.
Yeah. Got to build a smart prompt.
Yeah, that was my very long answer to your question about, like, I think that the reality is, in the summary of it is, learning and understanding as much about AI and how it works is just as important as just using it and, trying to get to a goal. You're not going to get to your goal unless you really, truly understand it. So it's worth putting in that extra effort to learn about it.
Totally.
100%. Well, thank you both for sharing your expertise there. In closing, Ana, would you like to tell listeners how they can find you?
Of course. So they can find me on LinkedIn. I also developed my own framework, the Experimental Marketer Framework. And you can also find that experimentalmarketer.com, and you can learn more. The framework was developed by me, a marketer, to help other marketers working with marketing technology and first-party data strategy. And you can also go to my personal website, anamourão.ai. So those are all places where you can find me. I'm also a contributor to the martech.org publication, and I have my Experimental Marketer Substack as well. So many places where you guys can see my or read my insights and my recommendations and to-dos and guides to help all marketers with first-party data and marketing technology.
Awesome. Well, we thank you so much, Ana, for joining us on the show today. This has been another great show. And maybe we'll have you back on again in the future.
Yes, thank you so much. It's been fun.
100%. Thank you so much, Ana. And in closing, audience members, we invite you to get powered by BDEX. So BDEX's industry-leading identity graph is the trusted foundation powering some of the top ad tech and martech platforms across the ecosystem. So our comprehensive identity resolution drives results across every channel. So from precision and ad targeting and website visitor retargeting to direct mail campaigns, lead generation, and turning anonymous website traffic, especially, into actionable customer intelligence. So whether you're looking to enhance your targeting or you're just trying to recover your abandoned cart, scale lead generation efforts, or maximize performance across digital and offline channels, BDEX delivers the most accurate identity resolution in the industry. We eliminate bots and bad data, and that waste, all of that bad data, it wastes your marketing budget. So we want to help you provide real verified audiences that drive measurable ROI. So just use that QR code on the screen if you're watching on video. If you're on podcast, just go to bdex.com and you can click on Talk to an Expert, and we'll help you get started with your data. And you can join the leading platforms that trust BDEX to power their success. So again, go to bdex.com, click on Talk to an Expert, and we hope you'll get powered by BDEX. Thanks again, Ana, for joining.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you.
Bye-bye.